All right. Well, we're about 2 minutes in. Looks like we got a good crowd so far. I'm sure people will keep joining. Appreciate everyone joining today. If I haven't met you before, my name's Dustin Harper, and we got quite a few people from the Brevity team here today, Ben, Niall, as well as the rest of the group. So excited to have you. And then also Brian Burns, who I'm sure most of you recognize. He runs the Brutal Truth About Sales podcast. He partners with us on this webinar series, and always grateful to have him on and hear some of his wisdom throughout this. So today's topic, I'll pull up the slides here in a second, but really we're changing up the format a little bit. Is we're going to focus more on the role play at the beginning. So we're going to do the fun part at the beginning where you get to see me do a live role play and give me some feedback, give me some roasting, whatever you want to do. And we'll kick off with that. And then we'll get more into the content with the slides, etc., and some of Brian's wisdom. But the topic today is differentiate your company, lock out your competition. So I think, as we all know, it's really hard to stand out in 2025. And whether it's at the beginning of the sales process, in the middle, towards the end, we're constantly getting pushed of how we're different from the competition and what we do differently compared to everyone else. And there's so much noise these days. There's so much distraction. It's really hard for our customers and potential prospects to tell what's good, what's bad, what's different out there. So if you don't differentiate, you end up in this sea of sameness, and you're really just like everyone else, which usually can be a low cost, race to the bottom type thing. So that's what the goal of today is to showcase you that differentiation trap. And I'll do the role play here in a minute, and then we'll get into the content and a lot of Brian's feedback. Brian, anything you want to add just with differentiation out of the gates before I do the role play?
Well, I mean, it is critical, because why are they going to buy your product over another one? If it's not differentiated, it's going to go to price or color or the favorite website. So it's a critical thing. And I think a lot of people take the wrong approach by feature dumping. And I think what we're going to talk about today is the opposite of that.
And before I get going here, if anyone wants, in the chat, I'm always curious because we got a lot of people on. What industry are you in? If you want to put it in the chat, I know we had Corey talking about med device. I saw some people in SaaS and software, but if you want to put in the chat just what industry you're in, and you can put the company as well if you would like, and maybe which part of the country. It's always good to see all the different faces out there in different industries that we help with. So, all right, guys. Well, I'm pulling up my screen right now. Can you guys see my screen? Right, just getting this going here. All right. Okay, so a little bit of background on this. I'm speaking to a CEO of Land O'Lakes. Her name's Beth Ford. Basically, what I'm trying to do in this role play is quickly recap the problem that we're solving with her sales team to get her perspective on it. And then she is going to challenge me on how we're different and how we stand out from the incumbent or different competitors that she may be looking at. So it should be about 7 minutes long if I do a good job. So we'll see how that goes. And just so you can understand it, if you're one of our existing customers or maybe potential in the future, this is like a why Brevity. So I'm trying to explain how Brevity is different, but you can just imagine putting your company in there and having the same situation if you're talking to one of your potential prospects. So, all right, we'll go ahead and get this going because this is the fun part. We'll see if I can redeem myself. It is St. Patty's on Monday. Last month when I did this for the first time, I didn't score that good. So maybe I can do better this time. It's St. Patrick's Day and my middle name's Patrick. So hopefully I get a little bit of luck this time around. All right. And the sound should be working. If for some reason you can't hear it, let me know.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
Thanks, guys.
Three, two, one, start speaking.
Beth, great to see you. Appreciate the partnership so far. It's been a pleasure working with your sales leadership team. just today I wanted to quickly recap the problem that we're trying to solve with your sales team and then get your feedback and perspective on it. So to quickly recap, the leadership team was having challenges where deals were getting close to the finish line. They were getting to the 10-yard line, and all of a sudden they would stall, they would go off the rails, and they would lose the status quo, or the deal would shrink in size and get pushed to next quarter. So we had several calls to try to deep dive what the challenge was and why that was happening. And we came to two conclusions with your team. First off, even though you have a lot of really tenured sales reps, they were going too big, too fast, trying to win new logos. And they were trying to do these enterprise type deals when they really probably should have been trying to get pilots and just get in the door and expand from there. So they were falling into the big deal trap, we call it. Second is that because your deal cycle is close to a year, almost 12 months, it's really hard to keep momentum. And although it seems pretty simple, they weren't justifying and they weren't getting the next steps committed on the calendar. So they were losing momentum in the deals. And basically those two things were causing about $1 million of revenue being left on the table every quarter, which had a significant impact on the business. So I was curious, what stands out most to you from those traps that I talked about and the impact on revenue?
Oh, I see. Well, those are definitely significant points to address. But I'm curious, how does your solution specifically tackle the problem of the big deal trap compared to what competitors might offer?
It's a great question. And I think it can be confusing out there because there's a lot of AI companies and it's overwhelming to people like yourself because it's hard to tell what's good, what's bad, what's indifferent. So if you're looking at us compared to companies like Gong and other ones out there, there's really three main things that make us different compared to the competition. First is that we're not just AI role playing, but we have these pre-built traps, we call them. We have about 20 traps that are really those critical moments where deals slip and they stall. And we spend a ton of years of research and a ton of time to put these together. And that's something that's different from our competition out there. Second is that we're not just SaaS, but we of course have the scalability of SaaS and saving your team time and money. But we also have the revenue performance side where people like myself, our customer success team, we find these common areas where deals are stalling and we consult with your sales leadership team to solve those revenue problems. So you get a combination of SaaS and the consulting, which is great. And then last but not least is that we have a relentless focus on the end user. And whether it's the leader or the reps, we try to meet them where they're at. So we have a ton of new products coming out this year. For example, we have role playing that's going to go straight to your phone. So if a rep is out in the field, they can do a role play real time on their phone. So that's a few ways that we're different. What stands out most to you?
Got it. I appreciate that breakdown. So, just to clarify, how do those pre-built traps really impact the deal closing process in ways that your competitors can't replicate?
Keep talking back. It's not answering the questions that you're asking.
Yep. So we basically what we do there is that we want to set up a pilot with the divisions that we were talking to. So what we would do is the big deal trap specifically. We work with your team and we set up the role play so that they don't fall into that over and over again. And then we also have the get the next meeting on the calendar trap that we do so that they keep momentum in their deals and they keep progressing. And that's really what we would target during that 3-month pilot. We go deeper on less and we keep progressively making progress over that time. And it's really a 4-step process with our pilot. And first is planning. So we do a lot of pre-planning with your team as well as the end users. Second is establishing engagement goals. So doing 2 role plays a week and trying to hit 40% compliance. We get continuous feedback from the end users, managers, and C-suite. And then we have target KPIs. So tracking engagement percent, what is the win rate? And then also the deal cycle, trying to decrease months off the deal cycle to get to the finish line. What stands out most with the KPIs that you care about?
Okay, I see the step-by-step process you're suggesting, but I'm still curious. How have those pre-built traps shown to significantly reduce deal cycles and improve win rates compared to other top solutions in the market?
Great question. So we had a similar size customer in the industrial space to Land O'Lakes. They did well over $1 billion in revenue, and they have a lot of different business units and are very complex. So we worked with one of their business divisions and basically did both of these role plays that we're talking about and did that over a 3-month period. What we found and what we were able to get in results was an increase in win rate by 20%, and they closed close to 500K more deals during that time. So we're able to track that during those few months and recap the results. And we also had mandatory role plays throughout the week where they had to do at least 3 per week, and that showed a ton of success. So we would like to replicate something similar with Land O'Lakes. So my suggestion would be that you and I continue to meet once a month, even just for 15 minutes, so I can keep you up to date on the progress and the goals. And then myself will meet with your sales leadership team and the technical team so that we can plan the pilot, make sure the KPIs are on point, and be successful with Land O'Lakes. Would that work for you to set those meetings up?
Oh, I see how you got those results with a similar company. Your approach seems methodical and data-driven, which is great. But on that note, how would this integrate with our current systems and procedures, since seamless integration is key for us? Also, just out of curiosity, can you provide some more examples or data that highlight your solution's effectiveness compared to top players in our industry?
Definitely. So we're typically a standalone tool, and it's easy just to have it on your desktop for the sales team, and it's super simple, easy to implement and get on your computers there. Also, we've implemented with over 5 different Fortune 500 companies, so we've never had any major problems with technology or other integrations. So we'll send you to our trust center and make sure you have that information. But it would be great if we could go ahead and set up those weekly meetings with your teams, and then I can dive deeper into those case studies and how we compare against the competition. Can we go ahead and set up those weekly meetings with your teams, and then you and I meet once a month as well for the high level feedback?
Aha, it's reassuring that you're confident about seamless integration. However, I'd love to see some concrete case studies that showcase how you stack up against our competitors before fully diving in. Could you perhaps share those details first? Then we can talk about the next steps.
Sure, Beth, that sounds great. I'll send you some of those detailed case studies. I'll go ahead and put a placeholder on the calendar for you and I'll keep working with your sales leadership team weekly on the implementation plan.
Sounds like a good plan. I'll look forward to reviewing those case studies. Let's touch base once I've had a chance to go through them, all right?
Thanks, Beth. I'll send out that invite now, and we will talk soon. Okay, I made improvements compared to last time. I heard some background noise though, so now's the time to give me some feedback, give me some suggestions for the future.
Dustin, I think you did a great job. That was a tough one. I saw the last one, which was tough, and that was the technology's tough. I think you did a great job. I think one of your goals was to make sure you had a reoccurring meeting with leadership to stay in front. And though she wanted case studies to review beforehand, you still got a meeting to set up because you're instead of having the meeting to pursue the trial, you're going to have the meeting to pursue what she thought about the case studies. So you're still in front of her, so it looks successful to me.
What else we got out there? Do you guys get challenged on how you're different, or do your sales teams get challenged on how you're different out in the field? What's your perspective?
I know on my end, I'm definitely seeing it more and more. over the past couple months. I would say if you asked me last year, it was, once in a blue moon, but I'd say almost every deal now is very competitive for Niall and I. So I think having a prepared, even if you're not planning to talk about it on the call, but I think something you're going to talk about today is just slowly planting the seed right from the get-go on how you're different from the others. I think that's a great way to do it.
Yeah, I think
Dustin.
that's a great. Go ahead, Terrence.
Oh, sorry, this is Craig. Hey, Dustin.
Okay.
Craig Sisson with VMP Software. I thought you did a great job on it. I think sometimes differentiation is tough, even though you feel like you may have made the case. Customers may not have said what the customers wanted to hear, and that certainly felt like she kept coming back at you with keep coming at me. So tough situation, and Brevity is a tool to help make sure you can keep practicing it and making it more natural.
And it's important to also remember that clients want to commoditize us because they have all the power if they're all equal. If they see
Yes.
uniqueness, then they have to pay for uniqueness. If they say similarity, they pick the lowest provider or the easiest for them or the personal win for them.
Hey, Dustin, sorry for some of that background noise. I didn't realize I wasn't on mute. I think you did great personally, because she did keep coming back at you. And the comment that I was making, unfortunately, was more about the model itself, less your performance, and just that you were following up every one of your comments with a question, and it didn't, it just sort of ignored your question and just went on to asking you for more information. And so it was more about, are the models capable of responding to those questions and making a more engaging experience? Or, I mean, I understand at the end of the day, you still had to practice, 5 levels of understanding of the differentiation of your product, which is good. And differentiation for us is actually mandatory. So that's still a positive. But I was just curious about the model itself and what type of engagement can the conversation be if it's going to ignore your questions and just kind of go on to the next question that's in the persona.
That was on purpose.
Okay.
That the drill is designed to hound the rep, so the rep gets used to the client asking the differentiating questions.
To add to that, I think Terrence, the first time you and I spoke, I had mentioned the notion that we have between drills and scrimmages. These are like drills. I've used this example with other folks here. Like in football, you have the jugs machine as a wide receiver. It just keeps sending the ball right back to you. That's kind of what this is meant to do versus our maybe cold call or discovery call role plays.
And I can't see everyone on the screen now, but I did hear someone in the background at one point, and it definitely, I fumbled around a little bit on that. I don't know what exactly I said, but it probably didn't help. But no, I mean, and that's the goal of this, is like, it's hopefully going to be harder than what you see in real life. And I would much rather test up against a really hard, CEO on the AI than, stumble around. And it's important to note too, it's like, no matter how much you prepare, how long you've been doing sales, like I felt really good going into that. And then, now it's the moment, the brights are shining light, and you still stumble around stuff, no matter, how long you've been doing it. So it shows you like those critical moments are really important. So that's how I continue to try to look at it. And Brian, I had a question for you before we get into this. I mean, even anything over 25K at most companies goes up pretty high from approval level. So I know I was talking to the CEO of Land O'Lakes. That's not an easy meeting to get, but most stuff goes up really high. So you're going to have to talk to somebody high up at some point to get it approved. Would you, and any feedback there from you?
Yeah, and that's something that a lot of people don't understand about B2B. You have the user buyer who has the problem, but they have zero budget authority. A first line manager has maybe a corporate credit card. So then you got to go to a VP to maybe get 25K if they have existing budget. If they don't, most sales reps think you go to the CFO. That's an automatic no, because the CFO has no motivation to help you. You have to go up, which is either another vice president or a C-suite person. And maybe they can spend 50K without going higher. And this is what people don't understand. And it's playing telephone, because what's the likelihood the CFO is going to understand the product, the problem, the consequences? That's why deals go to no decision so often in new accounts.
Great, Brian. I know
So,
you
hey,
briefly
this is Tom. Just a quick question kind of about how things work. So in my experience, I mean, it's nice when somebody keeps asking you for what the differentiating factors are, but what typically happens is they don't ask you. And then you need to figure out, you know that differentiation is going to be an important part of the decision. So you need to figure out ways to blend differentiation into the conversation without being prompted by by whoever it is, the executive that you're talking to. And I would ask how so we're here to learn about your system, right? So tell me how flexible is it in that regard?
Well, that's a separate trap, the problem versus product trap.
Okay.
Because what are most reps? They're fantastic about talking about the product. The problem, nobody wants to talk about. Customer doesn't want to talk about it because it hurts. Rep doesn't want to talk about it because it's not the product. So we built a trap so that whether you use spin or whatever questioning qualification methodology you use, we can set the trap up to emulate your exact sales call.
Okay.
Hey, Tom, we've been using Brevity for about 6 months now, and I think you ask an interesting question, because sometimes if you build a model, it will fire back answers at you and reps aren't ready for it. But what I've actually found is that reps aren't not only ready for it, even when they get a lot of information, they don't do a good job of taking that information and moving it forward. So that's one part of, hey, let's get better at when it's giving me information, doing something with it. We've also taken some of those models that we built and trained the model to not give as much information, or not give as much information until a particular point, either in the conversation or until you do something too. So flexibility in the tool has gotten really cool as we've gotten better at setting up our model or our curriculum in a way that's meaningful to our reps.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
And also, ideally you're pounding the differentiation the entire time from the very beginning when you're cold calling, getting the first meeting, to the middle, to the end. So ideally in that situation, you're continuing, they keep hearing this stuff over and over again. And then we're going to talk about on the next slide about lockouts, which is another thing that is really important.
So the second point on differentiation is that not only they don't actually ask you about it, but that what you think differentiates your product from the other folks, you need to tell them why that's important to them. So to Brian, to your earlier conversation, where, hey, is it blue or is it red, or is that hey, ours is blue, and they're over there like, who the hell cares, right? So you have to demonstrate. I'm looking for something that's going to help me educate them as to why the differentiation is important. So you not only want to say, hey, it's blue, and hey, the reason that blue is important is because people's receptivity to blue is blah 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 blah, or whatever the explanation is for that particular differentiating point. And I guess what I'm just
imagine is, as a sales leader, being able to get that report from your reps, how well they did that, answered that question.
Yeah.
Instead of fishing through all these call recordings that you have, gigabytes of.
Sure. Okay.
Tom, that brings up another point that I think Terrence was making too, where sometimes the AI doesn't always act the way that you'd want it to. What I've really been pushing our reps as we practice together is neither do your conversations with the customer. You may have felt like you gave them differentiation, but maybe it didn't land the way you wanted to, and they keep asking you that question back. So we've been also trying to get them out of their heads as they do their practicing, and trying to beat the AI and try and get the conversation back on track, which is another skill in and of itself, right? Whatever I said didn't land. It's not whether or not the AI responds perfectly. It's how quick am I to make the adjustment to tune my message and send it back a different way that hopefully they receive it. Either way, I've got the practice from it. And so it's really just even working with the reps to say, hey, you didn't lose, or you didn't not necessarily do it perfect, but now you just got repetition on that, where if you weren't using it in Brevity, you might not have had it to. I still think it's a win-win at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the practicing the calls is important, and we get so few of those really good calls set up that you want to make the mistakes on the practice, not with the real client, right? And even if the practice is imperfect, you're hey, if you can eliminate 50% of the mistakes, you made a significant improvement. Okay, thank you.
I saw Crichton, your hand went up. Did you have something to add?
Oh, hi, yes, it's Steve. Sorry about the labeling from Google. Apologize for that. Just an interesting point about the differentiation. So there's a trap in that as well, of course, which we're probably, hopefully all aware of, which is if you're not careful and you immediately leap to differentiating, you can accidentally make your customer aware of your competitor's product or a feature within your competitor's product which they didn't know about. So I'd love the AI to try to track that and to give us that ability to realize suddenly we walk down this direction where we're actually enabling our customer to be more knowledgeable about a competitor, to walk away and concentrate on our own advantages, which is something I see quite often, have seen quite often in the past.
Yeah, that's a good point. I guess we might have, there's probably a lot of opinions on that. I guess if you think they're going to find out about the competition at some point anyway, maybe it's better to come from you, when you're trying to differentiate. And that goes into our next slide about some of the lockouts. I think we can speak to some of that on this next slide. And we're about 30 minutes in. I think we should still get people out early today, but we probably have about 15 minutes more, and love the feedback from everyone. So let's keep that going. But Brian, just to go back to this slide, I think we feel pretty good about probably the definition right now, but what does it typically sound like from your perspective? Like, what are you hearing sales reps or leaders talking about? Like, how do you know when you're not differentiated and sounding like everybody else?
Are they looking at anyone else? Are they bugging you about price to value? If there's no differentiation, where's the value? And if there's no differentiation, how are you not a commodity? And if you're a commodity, it's going to go to color or price, personal preference, easy. If there's differentiation, then you have control. You have influence over the sale. They need you.
And the impact is stuff we've talked about already, but losing to a direct competitor, that's never fun and never a good conversation to have with your leadership. Probably the most popular, losing to status quo or doing nothing, which happens a lot because people don't always want to put their neck out there if they don't believe it is different and disruptive, or perhaps stuck in RFP, another favorite by a lot of us. And none of those are fun. And that tends to happen if you don't differentiate. And this brings us to what we call lockouts. So this is really suggestions to you guys of key takeaways from today of what you can do with your teams moving forward, and trying to give you as much value as possible for joining us, because we appreciate it. And the first off is something called lockouts. And Brian, I'd love for you to explain what you call lockouts and maybe some examples from your experience.
Yeah, a lockout is something that you do or are. So it can be your company, it can be you as an individual, or it can be the product. Some element, feature, capability of that product that you have that nobody else has. Now, in the example we had, Beth was interested in the big deal trap. That is a differentiator. Nobody else has that. If your reps practice the big deal trap, they will not fall in the big deal trap, and they will not waste time on deals that suck up a lot of time and never buy anything. That you need to take what they see as a problem. Beth saw that as a problem. My reps fall in the big deal trap. Well, It's natural, it's organic, it's instinctual to do that. A big deal is what salespeople live for. A big deal that never closes is what kills a rep. Takes up all the time, no reward. Managers don't want reps going in the big deal trap. How do they prevent it? Because when the manager sees it, they're in the big deal trap because they believe the rep. So what you want to do is take a capability and explain it to them, what they get out of it. Nobody else has it, and there's an immediate and robust return for it. Because now they're going to call whoever and say, do you have the big deal trap? And they go, what? What's that? And they're like, I guess you don't have it.
Appreciate that, Brian. And I'll definitely ask a follow-up question on that, but I'll finish the rest of this slide. And it could be other things too. It could be maybe a new product launch you have coming up. It could be the fact that you're a market share leader in that particular category. It could be the way you do white glove service compared to your competitors. There's a lot of things that can come out of that. But I think what the second takeaway is really setting the rules and trying to get ahead of this and being proactive with it. So if you haven't written out the lockouts of your company, highly recommend doing that. It's something that I've been doing for years and learned that from Brian a long time ago, because most deals come down to one or two things, and you want those one or two things to be your differentiators and your lockouts. So really understanding that with yourself and your team, I think, is crucial. And we don't want to obsess over the competition or spend too much time with that, but you do need to know what your top competitors' lockouts are, what they're really good at, what they're going to be telling your accounts, because if you don't, they're going to do that, and they're probably going to blindside you, and it might derail the deal. And I have a quick story of that example. So I used to do med device. I think we got a few med device people on today, and we were trying to displace an incumbent, a really big competitor. It was about $2 million of annual business at a hospital system, so very complex 12-month type deal cycles. And every time we had tried to displace this customer with this particular product, it would get stalled at the very end of it. And what I found out that other stuff was happening across the country, because I was talking with other reps, is that the competitor would say that if you bring in that new product and kick us out, then we're going to raise prices across everything at your hospital. So that was basically being told. That was almost like a lockout for the competitor. And then the result was that we weren't getting business because they would go straight to the top and sort of end run it and mess up our deals. So what I decided to do was, I knew the lockouts of the products, which were very innovative, and I kept pounding those, but I also proactively brought up that, hey, by the way, this has happened at other systems recently when we've been trying to implement this, where the competitor might go above you and talk about price increases. You know, what we found is that they never, from what we saw, they never followed up with the price increases. So I just want to give you a heads up about it. Not sure if it will happen, but I figured, you know, because we have a good relationship, I wanted to let you know. So that, not an easy conversation to have, and you got to be tactful with how you bring that up, but it helped get that deal to the finish line, because it did in fact happen, and my business champion was prepared for it, and it didn't derail the deal in that situation. So it's almost like if you've seen 8 Mile, the rap battle at the end, where you know what your competitor is going to say, and it's probably going to be a lockout to try to make you look bad, but how do you be proactive and preempt it from happening? So want to share that story real fast. Does anybody have any lockouts that they're willing to share about maybe their company or something that their teams are using that have been working lately?
I mean, I agree with what Tom said earlier. I think you got to look at your lockouts about what is the customer going to care about, and then go off of that. Like put yourself in their shoes, and that's how you guide the conversation and be proactive. Like you're saying, you start planting the seeds early, so they know what's coming from the other side.
And Dustin, we've been thinking a lot about lockouts lately too, and just how ready are we to position the lockouts, and in a highly commoditized market with a lot of feature functions that we compete in, really not only identifying them, but not just throwing feature functions at the customer necessarily, we're blue and they're green, but making sure that they're meaningful. I think that's the other trick I think everybody's got to remember is making sure that you're locking out on capabilities that are meaningful to the customer, because if not, you're just feature flipping, and that's, they may put it on your list or their list, and it's less meaningful. So we've been talking about lockup setting. How do you make it their idea so that you're persuading that it's their lockout, not yours, at the end of the day, and then you're competitive again. So not easy, not an easy skill to think about, not an easy skill to set up and practice, and so that's one of the curriculum components we're looking at trying to increase next year and leverage Brevity for.
Craig, we've named it as well. Like, I guess the way we describe it is just objection prevention versus objection handling. And I think even just naming it, like the way you're naming it as a sales rep, helps. So I found some of the benefits of these traps is not actually just even the practice, it's the naming of the traps. I feel myself on calls. I've said it before to a prospect, oh, I'm falling into the product versus problem trap. I've already showed them what it is, so I can now tell them, right? But when you know them, I feel like you can feel them coming. And I'd never really thought of it like that until we came out with this trap series.
Yeah, great point.
And it's not easy. To your point, you got to plan ahead. You got to practice. You got to be prepared, because for me to be quick on my feet and be able to rattle off some of these lockouts, talking to someone high up, I mean, maybe it can happen every once in a while, but if you're doing it multiple times, you really need to be practiced and be prepared, in our opinion, because it's all about how you perform when you're in front of that customer. And then the last thing here is, we've already talked about a little bit, is the problem versus a product. It's so easy for the salespeople to fall into just talking about the product, the features and benefits. It comes off very robotic these days. And really, sometimes a lockout can just be the rep itself. By the fact that the rep is talking about the problem and maybe pushing back tactfully versus just going feature and benefit dumping, that makes the rep stand out. And in some cases, the rep can be a lockout that's not repeatable necessarily or scalable, but it's something that you can gravitate towards with some of your best people on your sales team. Knowing your environment. So I know we have a ton of different industries on here. Some are really complex, some are maybe somewhere in the middle, or maybe some are shorter sales. But I think you need to understand your environment, because the shorter term sales tactics don't always work as well for complex deals, but sometimes that gets a little confusing out there. So really understanding that. And we probably could have a whole nother session about RFPs. Brian, I know that's one of your favorite topics, but those can be challenging because you get sort of forced into just talking about the product, and that can be tough. So ultimately, if you don't have lockouts, you're probably not going to get significant new logos or big upsells, because why would they take the risk? Why not just stay with what they're doing before? Why would I spend $100K plus on something new if I don't really understand how it's different, and that one or two things that I care about most that you want to tie to the lockouts? Any closing thoughts, Brian, on this part with setting the rules or anything I mentioned there?
Well, the point of the rep being the differentiator, I think it plays well, because I'm sure you've bought stuff before. It's the person who gets you, who understands you, who is helping you through this journey, not just answering your questions, but making you think about it differently. Because as the transaction moves up for approval, the people above the user buyer, they want to talk about the problem. They don't care about the product. They want to talk about what other people are doing with it. And that conversation is insanely valuable. And it's easy to practice it. And now they can build up that confidence and skill without it jeopardizing a deal.
All right, and then we'll open it up for feedback. But just last thing is, the 8 Mile. If you haven't seen it, I'm definitely not going to play it because it's probably not appropriate. But it's like the rap battle scene where Eminem is, it's the last part of the movie, and he knows what the competition is going to say about him. So instead of letting that happen, he just proactively brings it up. And then when his competitor gets back up there to do the rap, had nothing to say. That was good because it already been, he just fell on the sword and said it all. So being proactive with this stuff, whether it's your lockouts or what you think the competition may or may not be saying, it sometimes can pay off. So just wanted people to remember that part. And then, yeah, open it up for any other feedback, questions, comments from the group that we didn't touch on, or another question about the role play.
Well, good work, Dustin. For those who don't know, we're kind of throwing Dustin to the wolves here. He joined Brevity, I think, less than 2 months ago. So great work, Dustin.
Appreciate it, bud. Martin, go ahead. I think you're on mute, Martin.
I am. Yeah, thanks. Okay, fixed. The bane of my life, being on mute. So what you were talking about being a robot, right? So we practiced this a few times, and getting in tune with the persona. That customer in Brevity actually has some emotions, right? And it was when I'm start talking to his personal wins, man, that conversation takes a much better turn, right? And that's obviously a skill that we need to learn. And then we've also done the opposite, because we started saying, having an argument with a customer, can you believe it? And we were saying, they said something, and we'd say, however, and then suddenly this thing became very defensive, right? So yeah, okay, Brevity, you're behaving like a person. And once we become aware of it, yeah, this is something we need to improve in our conversations. And I think that there's a very strong human element in these personas that some days is this really an AI thing behind you? It sounds more like a person. So yeah, good job, guys. It's really helping massively.
Appreciate that, Martin. I think you told me that one of your reps asked for feedback at the end of the AI, where they were like, "Hey, what could I have done better?" And it actually gave them real-time feedback. That was a great one. I've not used that, but that was phenomenal.
You always get someone that gamifies the system, right? So one of our guys says, so tell me, Mr. Customer, how did I do in the sales call? And he got not the clinical feedback on the side, like, observer feedback. He got the real feedback from the customer. Now, I'd like more ROI. Show me more of this example. You should tell me more about this. And we're like, we should ask that question more. It's like pure gold, right?
I've never thought to do that in Brevity. That's genius.
Yeah, I've gotten it to joke around with me.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've done that.
You start asking questions, and I go, "Come on, what's it going to take?" And it breaks down. It kind of doesn't sound like an AI.
Exactly. Very good. Thanks again, guys. Awesome.
I'd just like to make everybody aware, and I'll be announcing it on the podcast next Monday, that we're building a customer advisory board, people who have feedback about the product, ideas about the product, and it'll be announced shortly. But keep that in mind. And if there's, as sales managers, what would you like to see in the product? That will help us make sure that companies building the product that you guys want. What dashboard functionality, what assignment, feedback from your reps. And that's how we came up with the trap series was, how do you get 5 to 15 minutes a day and have major impact on your revenue?
So Kelvin will reach out about that soon. But in the meantime, if anyone does have feedback that's top of mind, feel free to email Ben, Dustin, or I after this call or over the coming weeks.
We'll give people about 15 minutes back if there's nothing else. And yeah, we do these once a month. So we'll try to keep it as short and sweet as the name Brevity makes sense there. And we'll have a different trap every month. So similar to this, and it's all very relevant to what you and your teams are going up against. So we look forward to continuing this. And we also send out a recap next week that has it all broken down. So you can see the role play I did, as well as the slides and everything that we talked about. So if there's nobody else that has any questions, I'll try to give you guys the time back. And you can always reach out to us directly as well if you have follow-up or anything that you want to see for your teams or anything else that might have came up throughout this. But appreciate you guys.
Thanks, guys.
Great job. Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah.
See you all. Great to see you.
Take care. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Sumaya, did you have a question?